Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I'm so glad that you could all join us. I'm joined today by Nancy Deming. My name is Jill Buck, and the CRRA K-12 Technical Council is very excited to have each of you on this webinar. Nancy is one of our superstars in the state of California. She's a K-12 sustainability specialist, but the work that she's done in particular in the Oakland Unified School District is just outstanding. And so we are very excited to have her share her story and share the tips that she has with you today. Nancy, before I share my screen and bring up your slideshow, is there anything that you'd like to say as a matter of introduction?
And I appreciate everybody taking out the time on a Monday afternoon for this subject.
Well, it's going to be great. And just for everybody who is joining us, and if some of you know of people who couldn't join us but would love to see this webinar, I will be recording it and I will be uploading it to YouTube and sharing that link with everyone who registered. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up Nancy's slides.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I really, again, appreciate you taking the time to join this webinar. Seeing many folks on the call who have signed up who I know. And for those I don't know, please feel free to reach out to me and connect. This work I am passionate and committed to, and always available to coordinate and team together for a larger state and national impact. So again, Nancy Deming, my presentation represents mostly of my work for Oakland Unified, as Jill mentioned. So I'm the Sustainability Manager for Custodial and Nutrition Services. That's a unique shared position. So the position is part-time. So that allows me to be very fortunate to have grant funding to where I work with school districts in Alameda County. And then I also have contract work with a neighboring county, Central Contra Costa, with the same focus on K-12 schools, waste reduction, and sorting. So there's a lot of sharing of best practices and procedures and learning things from different districts. So it's a nice collaborative, multi-pronged role that I've got that definitely I appreciate kind of the synergy that's involved. So for today, be covering mostly on food waste target strategies. There is the importance on focusing on our youth to tackle these goals and teaching our students where our food comes from, the value of our food with environment and economics, food insecurity, and community service. We'll also be highlighting some of the projects today that we can go into further based on everybody's interest and questions that we see. So next slide, please. Okay. So food waste is definitely unavoidable for schools and school districts, with always needing to serve our students, meeting federal meal requirements, and operating on the federal meal budget, as well as catering from students from 3 years old to 18. So for Oakland Unified, we have about a third of our schools. We have about 90 total. So a third of them are packaged food dependent that have inherent food waste issues, as well as some periodic produce waste issues. The remaining of our schools have on-site cooking kitchens that still have food waste issues, but a lesser amount typically. So for Oakland, we are building a new central kitchen that will be eliminating approximately about 80% of the packaged food that we now have, and improve our overall school cooking kitchen offerings. But this is a few years out, plus more years for each school to get kind of upgraded to be able to take this kind of open pan style food to be serving it that way. So school food waste is a very significant problem on many levels, and it comes from a variety of sources for schools. So it requires tackling it in a variety of ways that we will cover today, as well as a number of best practices and programs implemented that involve the overall waste issues. So here in this outline, the photo is of a dumpster. So luckily it's a compost dumpster, it's not landfill. So it's apples and full milk cartons. So this was when we composted our milk cartons, which we've switched now to having them empty and recycling. But so the apples represent food that could have been reserved in our kitchens, and then the milk represents just reduction in general, and then food donation for those items. The other image there is a in-draft poster that we're just now creating so that we can have food, wasted food ideas for our kitchen staff to be referencing throughout their day so that they can be making changes within their own school. Next slide, please. So food share tables. So for Oakland, they did start informally at a few schools, but you know, it's just a table off in the corner. Kids just knew about it. Nothing kind of officially set up. And a lot of times somebody would say, oh yeah, we have a food share table, but then you look in the bins and you can see a lot of whole fruit. So for Oakland, we set it up so that it's district-wide. So all our schools have the signage and the bins and the procedures. So we've developed the procedures with Stop Waste, which is our county waste authority, and our county environmental health. So for Oakland Unified, so our kitchen staff pull and reserve all our fruit and shelf-stable items back to the kitchen to reserve. And then we are also testing reserving milk at 2 of our schools with approved procedures from our environmental health to see how the process impacts staff time and on milk waste reduction, with the main procedure for environmental health is not to reserve the milk twice. So we're just tracking to see, are we saving milk? Or are we still having to throw away milk? Is it realistic for our staff to be able to do this? What's involved? So we're piloting it to see how it goes from there. So next slide. So through our partnership with our environmental health department and Stop Waste, we've developed a procedure guide that all our kitchens have been trained on. So on our website, and we'll mention at the end a Google folder that's been set up, you can also find a 4-page overview on school food share tables for a larger general introduction that Stop Waste made, you know, for schools, school districts who haven't even kind of broached this subject yet. There are a number of districts in Alameda County that are following this guide that has been customized, and then the staff receive the training. So it's just, you know, popping off the logos and then making sure the kitchen staff are trained on the details and that the food service director is approving and putting through for their system. So definitely having a strong relationship with your county environmental health department. Collaboration is vital with the feedback and input, and with having the full dialogue and discussion on many items that come up with food share and food donation. So next slide, please. So for kitchens, the staff are always required to fill out a menu production worksheet. So for our worksheet, we've added in a couple new elements. So there's a leftover code. Here we go. So leftover code is supposed to be written in with the number of whatever's left over. And so the leftover code is in the upper left-hand corner. And then we added in the food share column so that they go out to the cafeteria and count whatever's remaining in the food share. So doing that food share piece has been a struggle to get our staff to be completely on board in documenting these, putting these numbers down. So they're supposed to make a quick count on the remaining items. They can do a guesstimate when needed, works fine, at the end of the last meal service on the items that they are needing to toss out from the food share, such as the milk and the entrees, so that we can track accordingly. So if there were oranges and bananas or apples, they can just pull those back to the kitchen and wash. But if they're needing to toss any of them, like if they're bruised or bitten into, then it's just, you know, composting those and just tracking the numbers for what we're having to throw away. So having this form submitted and filled out completely has required a fair amount of reminders on its requirement to ensure it gets done. We are in the process of making a more detailed procedure listing that covers additional information that's not on our current guide so that our staff reference it, and we're starting to go into disciplinary action on the staff that aren't submitting and completing fully. So, and we do mention this to all our staff repeatedly on the importance. So with combining these counts on wasted food, we can then look over the numbers, and on high quantities, we can target issues on the item and consider options. And then to also have numbers and the items available so that we know what the food donation potential is. So once we have the new procedure reference, that will get loaded up onto our shared folder that we're going to be having. So then I can share that out. So next slide. So last school year, we performed a series of 8 plate waste tracking and observations for the first time at a single school. We did do a few one-day drop-in plate waste audits at a couple of other schools as well. We do have plans on continuing this more this school year, and my main focus is trying to find a way to simplify it, and then also figuring out a way that we can have some kind of an audit check. The cafeteria, the kitchen staff managers come out and look in the bins and report any food waste issues. So next slide. So with our County Waste Authority Stop Waste, we held a couple of plate waste studies that was conducted with direct student involvement in the process. So it was Stop Waste Student Action Projects. So this is an ideal method, if available, with it taking it directly, the food waste issues directly into the classrooms. Next slide. So food donation. So with the excess that comes from normal kitchen leftovers, excess from unknown field trips, anything close to expiration date, and items left on food share table, we've been developing our food donation program. We have set it up in a few different distribution methods. So we have the food for families, food for community partners, and then started this last school year, food for students. So the food for families, so this is typically run by a school parent team and offers our surplus food to the students' families. So then the food for the community partners, that includes different nonprofits coming and picking up the excess food from the school, and then they distribute it to their members their organization serves. Then the more recent one, food for students, is where the surplus food is sent to the main office or the health clinic to then be available to students if they're needing food during the school day. An additional method that we're gearing up and tackling for this school year is a collection system with our refrigerated trucks to go to a number of schools to collect that surplus so that we have a larger volume to serve our families and to nonprofits. Next slide, please. So we had a pilot year a couple years ago focusing on ramping up on our food donation program with special funding from Stop Waste. Through this pilot, we documented the best practices and procedures that's now in the recently released School Food Donation Implementation Guide. So the guide has step-by-step instructions and customizable templates. The guide also covers laws and regulations that govern school food donation. So the guide is available to view and download from our shared folder, as well as the OUSD Green Gloves web link. Just for now, on our shared folder, for some reason, I couldn't get the forms to upload properly. So there's a little glitch on that, but in the meantime, those forms can be accessed on our OUSD Green Gloves webpage. And then we'll be having a procedure guide similar to our food share guide done hopefully this school year that we can share out as well. Next slide, please. So for our state, we've had excellent progress this fall with 2 state legislations being created and signed that promotes and increases our school food share and donation. So we have SB 557. So this bill reinforces and covers all items possible for schools to donate food. It covers items specifically left on cafeteria food share tables that can be donated. It also calls for the requirement for CDE, California Department of Education, to update their management bulletins, the guidelines, to match. Then we had, just like 2 weeks after SB 557 was signed, then we have SB 1219, which allows school districts to officially consider offering food for students and food for families, with being able to donate directly to the end recipient versus a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. The other perk, a lot of times for schools, the bill also allows a school to donate items that are past expiration date, but we deem still perfectly good, such as milk that might be a day past date. Next slide, please. So then switching gears slightly under the custodial kind of umbrella, covering some of the things that we've implemented and things that we maintain and then try and improve on. So last school year, we started a focused 1-hour training for the full custodial staff on waste handling procedures and issues that includes a test for the custodian. So the test is just for the heads and the leads at the end of the training. That also includes a customized certification on passing. And then during this training, they also get a packet of information that they take back to their school site so they can talk to their administration, and then also post in their custodial room for the full custodial team to reference. So this has helped greatly on custodians being knowledgeable and involved in the program. And then we've also been hosting an annual custodial symposium, which is going on for 8 years, that involves an inspirational speaker, a selected champion custodian panel where they share out on their program to their peers, and celebration with recognition. The event is catered, it has some fun activities, and we pass out useful and typically always wanted giveaways. And the one thing that we noticed, so with the symposium going on for 8 years, definitely was increasing the program, but the nuts and bolts, the specific procedures, weren't honed in and necessarily being reflected when they went back to the site. So that's when we started this past year doing the targeted training with what they specifically need to know on the program to be able to do the job effectively at the site. So we're still going to be maintaining both of these events going forward for each school year. Next slide, please. So taking the district-wide approach, last year we did present to all our principals on the program with needing to implement the program with us, now having the mandates that are in place for our county and state for the ordinances, with the need for them to also appoint a lead person at their site to manage the program, and then for me to coordinate with. So the same info as mentioned is shared with our custodians. So for our custodians, it is required district-wide that they are to be involved and that they are to get the correct material to the right dumpster. Many custodians have become definitely more directly involved at their sites. The pendulum has moved with many of our custodians. We do have some sites still that do not have a decent level sorting program. So this just kind of has the custodian a little bit in a standstill because they need to wait for the school community, the administration, and educating the students to become more involved for then the custodians to do their part. Many of our kitchens for our nutrition services staff have sorting stations in their kitchen, but it's not yet required district-wide to implement. So now it's just kind of an ask, let them know that the mandates are there and that it will be coming soon to their school. And part of this is just not aggravating the situation to where it would arise into like a union issue, kind of upsetting the system before it's ready. So next slide, please. So on best practices, we've got a number of literature that's been developed. So with the collaborative team in Alameda County, we developed a county best practices on setting up school sorting programs which is shown here in the slide. It's a two-sided kind of flyer that can be folded up. We also have an effective bin monitors in the bin monitors. So to have effective bin monitors, we created best practices listing so that the students and cafeteria staff can reference. And then we're developing posters for our cafeteria and kitchen, highlighting ways to reduce food waste. One of those we showed in the picture at the beginning of the slides. And then recently I pulled together best practices for video creation for schools. So students can reference this when they're getting ready to make a customized video on the why and how sorting video for their school. Next slide, please. So making waste hauling improvements, definitely been on my radar this year. We've been hit with a lot of overflow fees. We've had increased programs with breakfast after the bell, which increases our waste. And we've got continued budget cuts, which Oakland's definitely in the news on. So trying to find ways to save the district money, and especially because we pay a tiered rate. So landfill is the most expensive, and then we go down from compost and recycling. So there's motivation to improve on our sorting system so that we have less landfill. And then also working on reducing contamination. We are piloting at a few sites to switch over to all clear liners so that we can better track by visual observations of looking into the landfill dumpster for what's filling them up. This picture is showing a high school so that we've got this developed banner so that it has creates a station with using those bins. It can make an adjustment to the school culture and then also increase the knowledge on what goes where with the added photos. So next month we are planning to do another round of custodial training that's going to be more targeted just on hauling service issues, where we're going to include discussing the details about the hauling fees and the rates, the overflow fees that we incur, talking to them about right sizing, and then any service issues. So a lot of times we may have an overflow problem, and then we find out from the custodian that the driver didn't lock the gate, so then they're getting illegal dumping. So it's figuring out all the details so that we're operating more effectively, so that we improve our service, reduce the contamination, and hopefully save some funds. Next slide, please. So next steps. So we have a variety of different things that we're working on. This is a listing of a few. So starting this school year, our Take It To Go program encourages and allows students to take their fruit or carrots out of the cafeteria. So this applies mostly to our elementary schools. We created a poster on the basic details that we post in the cafeterias, so that way if there's any teachers or cafeteria staff and administration is questioning what the practice is, they can refer to the poster. We are planning on staging a food share and a food donation video so that we can educate our students on our larger food waste issues, encourage our students to respect the food that they're not planning on eating, and having an understanding on food insecurity. We're also getting ready to make up a flyer, small poster that would go into the classrooms for our teachers to use, so the teachers understand what's required in the meal program. So like isolating out just milk. A lot of times students take a milk when they don't need to, but we have to offer it. So the teacher can do that part as far as regular reminders to the students that they don't have to take the milk. So taking things back to the classroom to help enforce things that are happening in the cafeteria. Obtaining the food share remaining data. As mentioned before, it's not been consistent from us getting from the kitchens. So we are enforcing that more starting into this new calendar year. And then we're anticipating by January we should have enough compiled data to where we can start targeting any issues that we might be seeing and figuring out ways to reduce any high amounts. These numbers per site will also assist us on identifying food donation potential. And then we also applied with Stop Waste and Livermore District Campus Catering for a Cal Recycle grant that focuses on food waste reduction and recovery. So if we're awarded, crossing our fingers, it will assist us in our efforts further and with more focus. So next slide, please. So we've targeted a few survey questions that we want to put out to everybody on the call today. So the want is to kind of get a sense of what is happening in our schools across the state and for folks who have some of these programs in place. So what we're hoping on some of these questions, if you've got the program that's being mentioned, if you can write in the chat box what you have, then we have your name and your email that we can follow up with getting information. So like I know a number of our school districts have a food share guide. It'd be great to compile them all together, or anybody that has food donation, right? Like just pulling all the information so that we can reference each other's work and then help anybody who's getting ready to get started. So Jill, on that note, do you want to cue up the...
Absolutely. Yep, here comes the poll. I'm going to go ahead and launch that. We'll give you guys a few minutes to go ahead and check that out. One of the things that I'll mention while we're waiting for everyone to finish the poll is that we have quite a good representation of all of the counties in California, just about represented on the folks who signed up for this webinar. Not everyone could end up making it today, but we are recording it, and I will be uploading the link to, or uploading the recording to YouTube and sending out the link to the recorded webinar. I'll be sending out the slides, and we'll be sending out a link to a resource that we're going to share in a minute that Nancy's put together, a Google Drive full of some tremendous resources. So we'll be sharing that in just a moment. And nothing surprising here. Nancy, let me know if anything jumps out at you as I scroll through the results.
I'm thrilled to see the edible peel. So we've got a questionable thing that's happening right now with our environmental health department for Alameda County and Contra Costa on this edible peel and the food share. So I'll definitely be reaching out to you folks who have that to get more information.
Okay. And we see some folks that have a food share table, but they don't have their local health department approval. So that's an issue we may want to address.
Yep.
Alrighty. Okay. So let's look at the chat box. Nancy, do you want to go through some of these terrific questions?
Sure. So let me just skim through where it's not the feedback.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to let Nancy scroll through the chat box. And is there anybody on from EPA Region 9?
That's cool.
Yes, this is Wendy, and I'm on.
Hey, Wendy.
Schaefer.
Hey, Wendy, welcome. We have a question here. Somebody said EPA Region 10 has a school food share toolkit. Does your region have something similar?
We do not. Theirs is great. And I'm actually typing in the chat box some of the resources that we do have. We have a Metro Regional Food Recovery Guide for LA, San Diego, and the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also got with more specific information on donations, stress reduction, and so on. We also have a flyer on how to get kids to eat more and waste less that we worked on with the USDA Food and Nutrition Service. So it supports all of their guidelines. And I'll give you that link as well.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we share everything that's going on in the chat box, and we share that with everybody as well. I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves. Okay, everybody, if you're on a phone, mute that. And if you're on a computer, if you could mute your computer. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. It sounded like a helicopter in the background there. And so I see that Christine Flowers has raised her hand. So Christine, what question did you have?
It was just to get the sound.
Ah, okay.
That's
you were
all.
hearing that too.
Yeah,
all right.
No problem.
Okay, Paul has asked a great question. He says, I work for a landfill and have just begun working with one local school district to implement a food waste sorting and food share donation program. While I've taken all the resources from OUSD, Green Gloves, I would like any information that would help us make it a bit more of a successful program. Nancy, what would you say to Paul?
So the benefit of this webinar, thanks to Jill and Debbie on doing, is that we've developed this shared Google folder so that we all can share. And so on the OUSD webpage, I can only put things that are more based towards the general public. So any internal documents, I'm supposed to keep those internalized. So on this shared document,
I'll share that right now. I'll show everybody.
I've got a variety of our different things that we use as far as custodial, information posters, procedures. There's the survey, there's a green team lead. There's a variety of resources in here that might assist you on taking the program further.
Can everybody see that Google Drive with all those resources in it? I will be sharing that link with you all. And in fact, I did share that before the meeting started in the chat box. But that's what you can expect to see when you click on that link. So I
uploaded those all this weekend, and I just uploaded them. So my vision is that we put them into categories, into smaller folders, and then uploading more. A great thing that we could consider is pulling together information from everybody so that we've got a variety of information all available for us to resource. So it's a working folder.
That's right. That's right. And actually, that was why we had you type into the chat box if you had various resources, because we'll be getting in touch with you to see if we can't share what you've got in that folder. We have a question from Bernadette. It says, I represent the LA County Department of Public Health and Environmental Health. We are in official discussions with other county health departments throughout California at this time regarding the reserve and share table concepts. Please get in touch to discuss further. And Nancy, I'm sure you will. Is there anything else that you could share with Bernadette?
Yeah, aware of the work that's happening in Southern California, and definitely our environmental health department is planning on reaching out to folks statewide to figure out some of the issues. And then I'm also in contact with California Department of Education, my point person, just to be on the same page of what the CDE is going to be writing up on some of these procedures, especially with the edible peel fruit piece, and then some of the procedures on timing and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's going to take our whole state to figure out some of these specifics. And it's great to see examples of folks that are doing the edible peel, but then it's a matter of having the take from the environmental health department.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as you all have those discussions down in Southern California, we'd like to stay in communication with you so that if you do come to some resolutions that we can share. As you all know, CRRA, the California Resource Recovery Association, is a statewide organization, and this K-12 Technical Council represents the whole state, and we want to make sure that we're sharing those pieces of information you create with some of our members and some of the people who follow our online community as soon as you have them. So thank you for being in contact with us. We have a question from Izzy. Izzy says, I work for a hauler as a recycling coordinator. In your opinion, what are the specific ways in which a hauler can support these types of programs? Nancy, what would you say?
I think assisting the school district, depending upon who that point person is. So if they have, as the field is improving, right, more school districts are having kind of a sustainability coordinator, recycling coordinator, and if there's not a position, then it's checking in with their custodial department and seeing how you can support them. So with our hauler, they're strong allies. So we coordinate on making up our signage. Part of our contract is where they provide certain bins. They do a Green Career Day for our high schools a couple times a year, that offering. They also do a lot of site visits, because especially for Oakland, with us having about 100 sites, so then we team off to where they'll go to a couple, to a region to support the custodians, help me get them bins, find out any, additional support that they may need. So yeah, the hauler can definitely help, because there's always so much to be done at the schools, to where having that extra support is typically pretty vital.
Mm-hmm. This is a question from Karen. She said, has the food share program brought OUSD into compliance with AB 1826?
It will help, and especially with the whole idea of lessening our packaged food. So it's definitely a lot of kids pull food from that food share, right? So that's the whole concept of having a food share, is offering students to have a second piece of fruit, or change their mind on the item they got, or if they didn't get a milk, they can get a milk. So reducing. Then once it's there, for schools that can handle it, then they could choose to depackage it, right? So stuff is going into the compost bin, and then the wrap's going into the landfill or the recycling, depending on what the packaging is. But with the food share, the idea then would be you're consolidating all that potential donation, to where then that way you're bypassing it even hitting any of the bins and that depackaging issue. So it's definitely, food share tables are a first step for schools to consider. To then the next step would then be, what options are there for the food donation?
Mm-hmm. Now, here's a question from Janet, and she asked, can you share your waste hauling contract language?
I can ask Janet.
And I think a lot of people are always curious about how that happens, because that is oftentimes such a local thing. So yeah, we'll definitely get back to you on that, Janet. I think that anytime we can have examples of contract language, that's very helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I know that some of you who have asked questions already have something going on, and maybe some of you who don't have these types of programs going on, I don't want you to feel embarrassed. I would venture to say most school districts are way behind Oakland. I mean, this is an exemplary program. So if you have questions of a more fundamental nature, don't be embarrassed to ask those questions. Go ahead and ask those. But you can also, of course, send those to me offline, and I can get those to Nancy and make sure that they get answered. One of the things I want to mention, because I know that some of you have had some technical difficulty with Zoom, if you are joining from a school district computer, sometimes there are difficulties with softwares like Zoom or WebEx or other video and web conferencing softwares as a result of your IT settings. And so if that did happen to you, I apologize, but make sure to send me an email after this session's over with so that I can help you resolve that. Here's another question from Janet. She asked, did you run into any union issues regarding requiring custodians to participate in the recycling program?
Yeah, so, it's a slow process. I've been at this for about 8 years. And, it's just keeping at it. So the beginning, it was always issues about, the union president or the custodian saying, well, it's not in my contract, and where's the money? I hear that so often for the first couple of years. But as we just kind of kept the conversation going, the complaints lessened. And then we made agreements. So like the first agreement with the, somebody's got a dog, with the custodian union was if the students collected, so the classroom recycling, if the students put it out into a collection bin, then the custodians are then required to take it from there. So if it's consolidated in a meaningful way, then it's custodian responsibility. So that the union president, the union did approve on. And then it just slowly kind of evolved to where a lot of custodians, just with it being on their radar, started working it into their day or their night crew to be collecting it themselves. Because now I promote as far as so we get grant funding to cover any, you know, tandem dollies, a 32 blues, and that way they've got a blue bin and a gray bin and they can collect. I'll say, okay, how many night custodians do you have? We'll get 4 setups. So each custodian can be having the tools that they need, and it's not out of their site supply budget, which is always under budget. You know, they always go over budget. They don't have enough funds for the school year. And then with the mandates being in place, then the custodial director is just saying, this is mandatory now. There's no more questioning. If your school is sorting, it's got to be figured out how to get it collected. And then, like I mentioned with nutrition services, the nutrition services director doesn't want to push on the kitchen staff yet because she's worried that it might push the union before they're ready. So it is really respecting the union and the boundaries. And for Oakland, we're able to, but it's just not, it's making sure to keep the union involved and in agreement. And the thing that I pitched too is like, okay, this is mandated, so how are we going to come up with a solution? And a lot of the custodians are now aware, okay, so I have to do this, but they now are so savvy, they know that the issue is on the school community, right? The students to be able to sort properly. So we're saying it's mandatory, but it's not happening in all of our schools just because we've got to work through the administration and then educate the students to then the custodian to be doing their part.
Right. Paul has a terrific question. He said, has anyone conducted on-site composting of the food waste?
Yeah, so we have a number of our schools that have composting. We have one school garden that's just phenomenal. They've got chickens and she's got carbon sequestering happening. She does the worm beds. She even does milk composting with the milk that's remaining in the dump bucket. With her, she's got a lot of, instead of a worm bench or a box, she has worm beds. So Oakland's really fortunate to have a number of food corps members. So one of their tasks this year, which is great, is setting up a lot of worm beds at a number of our schools. So that's going to be taking all that fruit, veggie waste from the cafeteria out to the garden, to those worm bins, worm beds. The other thing that we started a couple years ago is getting worm boxes to our preschools. So then that way they can kind of have some hands-on understanding on worms and composting and food waste. We were also really fortunate. So our county has a preschool greening program. So they have a fellow that comes through every 9 months. And so the last 2 years, the 2 different folks, we've been able to now implement sorting programs at all 20 of our preschools, which is a thrill to me because now we have our youngest learners on board. That way when they go into kindergarten, they're already ready, they know what to do, influence the rest of the incoming kindergartners.
It's wonderful. We have a question from Michelle, and she said, when looking for new schools to pilot programs like these, Are custodians your first point of contact?
Usually. I mean, it's so my position works, I'm shared between custodial and nutrition services. So I know most of all the custodians. If a school's wanting to start a program at a certain school, like if a teacher reaches out to me, then I'm always going to be checking in with that custodian to see what their take is from there, what they're observing on their side. Custodian is a vital key player. So they need to be involved throughout the process whenever thinking about, and then the planning, and then the maintenance. The custodian should be right there in the mix, kind of chiming in and giving feedback and ideas. A lot of the elements to our program have come from custodian input. So it's always great to run things by them and let them know that you want input. One of our custodians, champion custodian for the sorting program a number of years ago, she's like, okay, so we're making all this food waste to go to compost that the hauler's picking up, but then our garden we're struggling to make on-site composting. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get some of that, our food waste, back after it's composted to the school site? Like, brilliant. Mm-hmm. So now if a school wants compost or soil for their school garden or a planting project, we have a donation program where the schools can get, number of cubic yards for the compost or the soil or mulch to go to the school gardens.
Outstanding. Now, I don't see any additional questions in the chat area. Would anyone like to ask a question verbally? You may have to unmute yourself.
And if anything comes up down the road, tonight, falling asleep, trying to, you're thinking of a question, feel free to reach out to me. Before we sign off, we'll share the last slide that has my contact information.
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Email me, text me, give me a call. I'm open source.
Get that to the beginning. And if there's anybody who has a verbal question, chime right in. Don't be shy.
This is Paul Freund. I was just curious more about the composting because we don't have a hauler that will take food waste compost. Mm-hmm. So we have to do everything on site. So I'd love to get more of that contact info, but I'll just email Nancy directly. I appreciate that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, for our school gardens, it's encouraged to just do the fruits and veggies with the leaf debris, that sort of thing. With our new central cooking kitchen that's coming around the corner in a couple of years, one of the things that I'm looking to do is get like the closed system. So they're vessels that are closed. So Green Mountain Technology makes these, they do an earth flow and then they do earth tubs. So I've seen an earth tub at a couple of schools in the county. So I'm thinking for our district, at least for our central cooking kitchen, is having 2 earth tubs, because then that way you can handle everything, the meats, the cheeses, napkins, that sort of thing.
This is Paul again. Have you found any grant funding for that?
So for Alameda County, we're blessed with an organization, a nonprofit called Altamont Education Advisory Board. And so they have a grant program to fund projects that are focused on waste reduction and sorting programs for Alameda County. So that's my main go-to for funds. Cal Recycle opens up periodic grants. Captain Planet has grants. The hauler may have some green type grants. Yeah, and especially for composting, if you look up like school garden grants, there's going to be a lot of options there as well. The trick is finding grants that are going to pay you a decent amount of money, but then not be so much work behind the scenes on the reporting to have it balanced.
At number 4, your NHL exciting
Great. Are there any other questions? These are fantastic questions. And before we go, I also want to give Debbie Dotson and Christine Flowers, who are also on the executive committee of the K-12 Technical Council, a chance to say hello to everyone and share any information that you all would like to do that. Debbie, if you are still with us, if you want to unmute yourself and say hello.
I am still with you all. Thank you very much. I have a little bit of laryngitis, so I won't talk much. Everyone for being on the call today. There's another webinar. Hold on, I'm going to cough. I'm going to mute myself.
Mortgage guidelines. The programs are available, but many lenders do not understand them.
More information on the webinar that I'll put out tomorrow about California Beautiful, and then jump back off the call.
Sounds great. And I'll make sure that everybody who registered for this gets a hold of that as well. Christine Flowers, are you still with us?
I am, and can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I just was also going to mention the upcoming webinars for our free K-12 school recycling challenge, which does include organics as an option. For the Keep California Beautiful, the 2018 competition will be in February, and we have 4 upcoming webinars that are essentially 30 minutes or less, depending on the number of questions asked. But Wednesday the 6th, the 7th, so Wednesday's at 3, the 7th is at 10 a.m., then the 24th of January at 10 a.m., and the 25th of January at 2 p.m. But registration is open, and for the webinars and for the competition, and we like to give away lots of cash prizes. So they can visit greencaschools.org for more information.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christine. And thanks to Nancy. First of all, you're just a superstar and you're so inspirational. Thank you for sharing your time, and you put a lot of work into this presentation. And we're so proud that, that you were able to be with us and share this great information with everyone, and that you are a Californian. So we're so excited that you were willing to do this. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to everybody for joining us. We're going to be ending the meeting now, but there'll be new meetings very similar to this on a variety of topics coming in the new year. So everybody, have a great day.